Will it ever end? Well, it seems impossible, but the more conversations are being held about the discriminatory practices and assumptions that becloud the minds of certain people, one step at a time, the more we'll begin to see people being held accountable for their wrong judgments. As we begin with another interesting story, please show your support to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button. You should also turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories. Thank you. The day started off serene, with the sun rising over a quiet suburban neighborhood. Marcus, a tall, kind-hearted black man in his early 30s, was walking two energetic golden retrievers through the tree-lined streets. He wore a simple t-shirt, cargo pants, and a warm smile that made him approachable. Marcus had just moved into the neighborhood a few months ago, taking a job at a nearby animal clinic. Although he was one of the few black residents in the area, he tried to make himself approachable and friendly. He was taking his break after an overnight shift, offering to walk a few clients' dogs as a gesture of goodwill. Marcus loved animals. His passion for their care was why he became a veterinarian. On this particular day, he was enjoying the crisp air, letting the dogs sniff around as they explored. A few houses away, Karen, a middle-aged white woman known for her involvement in neighborhood affairs, peeked through her window blinds. Karen was notorious for her judgmental demeanor and habit of calling the police for the smallest infractions. When she spotted Marcus walking the dogs, her eyes narrowed suspiciously. She didn't recognize him, nor did she recall seeing him around often. Karen stepped outside, pretending to retrieve her mail, though her intent was clear. She called out, her voice sharp, "Excuse me. Who are you? And what are you doing with those dogs?" Marcus stopped, his expression calm but confused by her tone. "Good morning," he said politely. "I'm walking these dogs for a couple of clients. I'm a vet at the local clinic." Karen folded her arms, raising an eyebrow. "Vet? I've never seen you before. Are those even your dogs?" Marcus chuckled lightly, trying to ease the tension. "They're not mine, but their owners entrusted me with them. They're regulars at the clinic." Karen's suspicion only deepened. "I find it odd you're just walking around here with no identification or uniform. This neighborhood doesn't need strangers lurking around." Marcus sighed, knowing exactly where this was going. "Ma'am, I'm not a stranger. I live 3 blocks over, and I'm just doing my job. If you'd like, I can call the owners of these dogs to confirm." But Karen wasn't interested in hearing reason. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and loudly began reporting Marcus. "Yes, I'm calling to report a suspicious black man walking around with stolen dogs. He's claiming to be a vet, but I don't believe him. Please send someone quickly." Marcus's face fell, a mix of disbelief and frustration. A small group of neighbors had started gathering, watching the scene unfold. One elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, stepped forward. "Karen, leave him alone. That's Dr. Marcus from the clinic. He's helped my cat before." Karen waved her off. "Stay out of this, Ethel. I don't know who he is, and I don't trust him." Moments later, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. 2 officers stepped out of the car, their expressions cautious but professional. "We got a call about a possible theft," one officer said, approaching Marcus. Karen immediately jumped in. "That's him. He's walking around with stolen dogs, claiming to be a vet." Marcus kept his composure, reaching for his phone. "Officers, I'm Dr. Marcus Carter. I work at the Bright Paws Animal Clinic. These dogs belong to my clients. I can call them right now to confirm." The officers glanced at each other, unsure. One officer asked, "Do you have any ID on you, sir?" Marcus nodded, handing over his wallet. As the officers checked his credentials, one of the dogs barked and wagged its tail. The commotion caught the attention of a young woman jogging by, one of the dog's owners. "Oh my goodness, Dr. Carter," she exclaimed, rushing over. "What's going on?" Karen froze, her confidence waning. The jogger continued, "Thank you so much for walking Max and Daisy today. I hope they haven't been too much trouble. The officers returned Marcus's ID, their expressions shifting to apologetic. Looks like everything checks out here, one officer said. Marcus nodded, his calm exterior hiding the sting of the humiliation he had just endured. He turned to Karen, his voice steady. I don't know what made you think I was a threat, but next time, maybe start by asking questions instead of assumptions. Karen stammered, I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Mrs. Jenkins, still standing nearby, shook her head. Karen, you've gone too far this time. Maybe it's time you think about what kind of protection you're actually offering. The officers left after confirming there was no issue, and the neighbors began dispersing, murmuring among themselves. Karen stood awkwardly, the weight of her actions settling in. Later that week, Marcus was surprised to find a handwritten note and a plate of cookies on his doorstep. The note read, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I acted out of ignorance and fear, and I deeply regret it. Karen. Marcus sighed, setting the note aside. While he appreciated the gesture, he knew that systemic issues like these couldn't be solved with cookies and an apology. He decided to use the incident as a teaching moment, speaking at a local community event about implicit bias and how harmful assumptions can escalate situations unnecessarily. The story of the black vet mistaken for a dog thief went viral, sparking conversations nationwide. Marcus's grace and composure became an example of how to handle prejudice, but he remained focused on what mattered most, his work and his community. Karen, on the other hand, faced backlash from the neighborhood. While some forgave her, others distanced themselves, tired of her antics. She began attending workshops on racial sensitivity, hoping to better herself. In the end, Marcus continued to walk through the neighborhood with his head held high, not as a victim, but as a reminder that dignity and integrity will always rise above ignorance. A week after the incident, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from a reporter at the local news station. The story of the misunderstanding had gained traction, and the reporter wanted to do an interview with Marcus to shed light on racial profiling and implicit bias. Marcus hesitated at first, knowing that putting himself in the public eye might invite both support and criticism. After discussing it with a close friend, he decided to proceed, not for himself, but to advocate for change. The interview aired on a Thursday evening, and Marcus spoke eloquently about the need for community education and empathy. He emphasized the importance of having conversations about bias and treating everyone with respect. The segment quickly went viral, bringing both praise and scrutiny. Among those watching the interview was Karen. She hadn't left her house much since the incident, feeling the weight of her public shaming. But as she watched Marcus speak, she felt something she hadn't expected, guilt mixed with admiration. For the first time, she realized just how deeply her actions had hurt someone who didn't deserve it. In a surprising move, Karen decided to reach out to Marcus directly. This time, she didn't bring cookies or a note. Instead, she requested a meeting through a mutual neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. When Marcus agreed, they met at a nearby park, neutral ground for a difficult conversation. Karen started by taking a deep breath. Dr. Carter, I know an apology isn't enough, but I need to say this face to face. I was wrong, and I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. Watching your interview made me realize how blind I've been to my own biases. Marcus listened carefully, his expression unreadable. I appreciate your apology, he said after a moment. But words alone won't change anything. What are you willing to do to ensure this doesn't happen again, not just with me, but with anyone? Karen paused, her face flushing with shame. I don't know where to start, but I want to learn. I've looked into volunteering at the community center and attending workshops on racial bias. Marcus nodded, impressed by her willingness to take action. That's a good start. It's about more than just one mistake, it's about changing how you see and treat people. A few weeks later, Marcus was walking the same golden retrievers through the neighborhood when he noticed a community meeting being held at the park. Curious, he approached and saw Karen standing at the front, addressing a small crowd. She was visibly nervous but determined, sharing her story about the incident and how it had been a wake-up call for her. She urged others to confront their own biases and to engage in conversations that could foster understanding. As Marcus listened, he felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't often that people truly took responsibility for their actions and worked to change. He stayed until the end of the meeting, clapping politely as Karen finished her speech. But just as things seemed to settle, a new twist emerged. Marcus began receiving anonymous letters at the clinic where he worked. The letters were hostile, accusing him of making a good woman's life miserable and trying to play the victim. It became clear that not everyone in the neighborhood supported the changes happening or Marcus's public stance on racial bias. One day, as Marcus was locking up the clinic, he noticed a figure lurking near his car. He approached cautiously, and to his surprise, it was Karen. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "I think I know who's been sending those letters." Marcus's eyebrows furrowed. "You've been getting them too?" Karen nodded. "They've been slipping them under my door, accusing me of betraying the neighborhood. I didn't know what to do until I saw you leaving the clinic." The two sat in his car, and Karen shared her suspicions. It turned out, there was a small group of residents in the neighborhood who had been unhappy with the increasing diversity in the area. Karen, who had been one of them in the past, recognized their rhetoric in the letters. "I think it's time we confront this head-on," Marcus said, his voice firm. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about changing the culture of this neighborhood." Together, they organized a larger community meeting, inviting local leaders, law enforcement, and residents to have an open discussion about the issues of bias and inclusion. The turnout was larger than expected, with many people eager to share their experiences and listen to others. By the end of the evening, it was clear that while there was still much work to be done, progress had been made. Marcus and Karen, once adversaries, had become unlikely allies in the fight for understanding and unity. The anonymous letters stopped shortly after the meeting, and the neighborhood slowly began to heal. Marcus continued his work at the clinic, earning the trust and admiration of the community. Karen, inspired by her journey, started volunteering regularly at the local animal shelter, where she found a new sense of purpose. Their story, though born from conflict, became a powerful example of how even the most unlikely individuals can come together to create change. And as Marcus walked the neighborhood with his clients' dogs, he did so with his grace and optimism, knowing that every step he took was one toward a better future. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring stories. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.